Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the joint budget work session of the Town Council and Board of Education on Wednesday, March 20th at 7 o'clock p.m. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Baganski? Councilor Lewis?
Present.
Councilor Balboni?
Present.
Councilor Carey? Mayor Delnicki?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Siracusa?
Present.
Councilor King?
Here.
Councilor Pendleton?
Present.
Ms. Corsi?
Present.
Ms. Estman? Ms. Kalia?
Here.
Mr. Mackey?
Here.
Chairwoman Manili?
Here.
Mr. Marks?
Here.
Ms. Poma?
Present.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Here.
Dr. Carter? Here.
He doesn't have to move, but if he wants his plate. I was just going to write one.
You can't sit assigned seats? Assigned seats. What your name tag is?
All right, we're on to item 3, public input. Per Town Council rules, this segment of the meeting shall not exceed 30 minutes unless extended by me or the chair with the consent of the majority of the council present. Anyone who would like to come forward from the public to speak at this time? Mr. Perret?
Hello, Mike Perret, 1497 Main Street. I just wanted to come up and express support for the Board of Education budget as it stands. As a citizen, I think one of the things I appreciate is predictability and advance notice. I think that the administration and the Board of Education has, going on 4 to 5 years now, been responding to the reality of record enrollment growth, among other challenges, getting through COVID and other things. And it was very clearly stated that the days of 2.5% increases would be limited once we started feeling the significance of that enrollment increase. And we are now roughly halfway through the projected increase with many more years to come. And I think the fact that we've been able to move off of reserve usage and still come in at an increase that is, I think, relatively low when you consider a 15% population growth. I think it's responsible. It responds to the reality of what's happening in our schools. And it also makes a small number of necessary investments that have been promised by the Board of Education in their strategic planning. And I think that, as we've discussed when I was on the Board of Education, it's important for us to move the district forward, not just respond to what's happening to us. So I think that this budget toes that line very well, and I appreciate the administration's efforts, and I would be supporting this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Perret. Anyone else who would like to come forward? Mr. Paterna?
Good evening. Andrew Paterna, 301 Strawberry Lane in South Windsor. Madam Chairperson, Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council, members of the Board of Education, Superintendent of Schools, and all the administrative staff. I thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. And I want to just cite the importance of the work on our excellent school system that have been done in the past by boards of education and by the administrative staff. I have watched as this community has grown and made a commitment to our school system. Remember, there is no town in the state of Connecticut who has built 4 new elementary schools in 10 years. That's never happened before. And it happened because not just the planning of the board and the superintendent and the staff, but also because this community embraced that kind of change. That was important. And that sent a signal to people around the state. So most people who move here, the families that move in here, who have kids going to the schools, why are they moving here? We have a great trash collection system. But that's not the reason. Okay? We do a great job with our trash collection and recycling. But they come because of the school system. They come because of the quality of education in South Windsor. That's a often repeated comment when you ask people, why did you move to South Windsor? At the same time as we see growth, it's evident our school administration, our school board, have proven time and time again to be good stewards of the educational programs for our children. We see reasonable budgets and outreach to bring diversity to our school staff, efforts to ensure our faculty and staff receive a reasonable salary increase as a way to recognize their excellent service to students. And meanwhile, we are spending the least amount of money per student in all the comparable school districts. The least amount of money per student. But don't let that dollar amount fool you. We can do that because we are spending money wisely, not cutting back on programs. We have more efficient planning and innovation and creativity that goes into the programs. So the dollars can be misleading, but we are doing a great job in terms of keeping costs down at the same time, providing that opportunity, educational opportunity for our students. They should be, the whole staff, the whole board should be applauded for their efforts. They do the best for our students, and in this community, we want the best education for our children. I thank you all for your willingness to make South Windsor the best in the state of Connecticut, and I thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paterno. Anyone else like to come forward at this time? Mr. Kubowski.
Phil Kubowski, 1909 Main Street. I'm also here tonight to speak in favor of the budget request for this fiscal year. The increase comes in light of unprecedented growth in the student population, something that we haven't seen in any other district here in the state. Even with the growth, we've now dropped to the bottom in our DIRG as for expenditures per student. I think even with the increase here, I don't think we're going to go up any higher on that list. I'd like to see us get up higher, but I understand that there's a lot that comes into play. Having done 6 budget cycles on the board and 3 on the town council side, I understand you guys have a lot of work to do in front of you. I've been through it. It's not easy. I would just ask that as you're going through it and you're considering the board budget, you remember something that was in the presentation that the superintendent made to the council a couple weeks ago. It's a proverb that I'm very fond of, and it says, "Society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they will never sit in." And I think that's very important for anybody who goes into public service to remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward at this time? Going once, going twice, seeing none. Moving on to item 4, our items of discussion. I would like to turn it over for discussion. The Board of Education proposed budget for fiscal year 2024-2025 to Chair Lisa Manili of the Board of Education.
Thank you. Good evening, South Windsor. And I am going to defer to Dr. Carter. She has opening remarks. Dr. Carter.
Good evening, Mayor Delnicki and Chairwoman Manili and all of our town leaders. I thought it might be helpful to our community for me to share some context for the Board of Education's proposed budget, both current and historical, because analyzing data in a vacuum has little meaning without placing that data into context. I'll start with some historical context. The average percentage increase I proposed in my first 10 years as superintendent was 2.78%. That number, as you probably have noticed, stands in stark contrast to the 7.29% increase in appropriation that I am proposing now. In the past, I tried to strike a balance between meeting the needs of our students and moving the school district forward while still delivering a fiscally responsible budget. And the historic budget data shows a consistent effort to achieve that balance. Past budgets demonstrate that we were able to contain costs while still achieving our strategic planning goals, which included important programs such as K-5 STEM, World Language, and full-day kindergarten. I wish I could say that this year's budget strikes that same balance as the budgets I proposed in the past. Unfortunately, this budget does not strike that balance, as it almost exclusively favors fiscal restraint with very little emphasis on moving the district forward. The once balanced scale is now lopsided because this budget only keeps pace with our enrollment growth and places fiscal responsibility as the priority. Sadly, this budget does not make our schools safer. It does not bring new academic programs. It does not lower class size, and it does not improve our secondary school facilities. It simply reflects the cost to maintain the status quo. Let's shift from historical local context and look to current regional context using education budgets in the Hartford region. While the proposed increase in appropriation is 7.29%, our actual increase in spending over last year is 6.09%. After collecting data from 24 other towns, we have learned that the superintendent's proposed increase in spending in South Windsor is essentially the same as the average superintendent's proposed increase in the Hartford region. Specifically, the average superintendent's proposed budget increase in the region is 5.96%, while our proposed increase in spending is 6.09%. This is important context because it reveals that the increase in spending in South Windsor is quite reasonable. On average, 24 other districts in the region are proposing the same percentage increase in spending as South Windsor, yet none of these districts are experiencing our enrollment growth. Another data point that requires context is education's share of South Windsor's overall town budget. During the town's budget presentation this past Monday, it was reported that the board's proposed budget represents 62% of the total town budget. For people who understand municipal budgets, I'm sure this percentage was not surprising because they know that school budgets represent the lion's share of the overall town budget in most communities. But there are many residents in our community who are not familiar with municipal budgets. And because the comparison of the board share versus the town share appeared on 7 slides, I worry that the community may misinterpret the emphasis on this one data point to mean South Windsor is an outlier. In other words, the board's share of the budget must be atypical since it was referenced so many times. As a result, I thought it would be helpful to our community to put that data into context. After researching other towns, not only is our 62% pretty typical, in many cases, there are towns whose education budgets represent an even higher percentage of their overall town budget. Upon reflection, it made sense. Since 153 districts spend more per pupil than we do, it would stand to reason that other towns direct an even higher percentage of their budget to their education system. And now let's shift to putting reductions to this budget into context. It is essential that our community understands why cutting the budget would be fiscally irresponsible. It may sound counterintuitive that cutting a budget would be fiscally irresponsible, but with our enrollment growth projected to continue, it would be fiscally unsound to impose further cuts to this budget beyond the over $4 million in reductions we already made before sending it to the board and town. And here's why reducing this budget is unsound. Reducing this budget doesn't mean we're cutting costs. It simply means we're deferring costs. That is an incredibly important distinction for our taxpayers to know. Fiscal responsibility requires us to be proactive and engage in long-term planning to avoid future spikes for the taxpayer. And speaking of spikes, I am fully aware that this community is feeling the effects of revaluation and that property taxes went up significantly for many of our residents. And the increase is felt so acutely because it comes in the form of a large spike all at once. I am sure that most residents would agree that it would have been preferable to have phased in the impact of increased property taxes over a period of years if such an approach was permissible. And while incremental increases may not be a lever available to us in the context of reval, it is available to us when it comes to the Board of Education's budget. I'm confident that the South Windsor taxpayer would tell us that they prefer we anticipate costs of enrollment growth and plan for these costs to be added to the budget incrementally. We know that our middle school is forecast to grow by 276 students, and our high school is forecast to grow by another 463 students. If we are committed to being proactive and effective financial planners, then we must anticipate the staffing needs over the next several budget cycles and implement these costs incrementally. Our HR department is projecting that we will eventually need up to 30 more teachers at the high school in response to enrollment growth. Phasing in the additional required staffing will be much more taxpayer-friendly than deferring all of these fixed costs and knowingly allow them to pile up and impact one budget cycle. I will say it plainly, our enrollment growth presents financial challenges. But we cannot cut our way out of this problem. We already have one of the lowest per pupil expenditures in the entire state. We already have a typical or an even smaller share of the town's budget than we see in other towns. We cannot wish this problem away, and we must accept what it costs to run one of the fastest growing districts in the state. Deferring fixed costs of enrollment growth is just kicking the can down the road, which is not in the best interest of the taxpayer. What we can do for the South Windsor taxpayer is to be proactive, keep pace with enrollment, and add costs incrementally. Deferring costs that we know are not going away only means an even bigger spike in future budgets. In closing, I hope that the data I have shared tonight, as well as the more extensive data I shared in previous budget presentations, speak to why we are urging our town leaders to adopt this budget in full. When I presented my budget 14 years ago, fiscal conservatives lauded my approach. I remember Representative Delnicki saying my approach was, quote, a breath of fresh air. For years, fiscal conservatives have said publicly that they really appreciate that I don't ask for $1.20 if I only need $1. My approach has not changed, but our student enrollment has. I hope placing the budget data into context was helpful, and I am happy to answer the questions you have this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. And before I open it up to questions, as I was looking at the budget book, since it's been a while since I've seen one of these, and we've got new members of the council, pages 4 and 5 of your budget book, if you can give us just a speak of an overview, and for the public as well, on these two important pages, just a quick overview.
Sure, happy to do that. So pages 4 and 5 in the budget book is a high-level summary of the budget drivers of the budget. And those drivers come in 4 categories. You'll see them outlined on these pages. And by the way, for the public, these are all online if you want to see these pages after the presentation. The categories are contractual salary and benefits and maintenance of operations, increasing enrollment, special education and pupil services, and strategic planning and program improvements. And those are the 4 categories where you see our drivers. I think I shared during the presentation that even though there is a large number associated with increasing enrollment, it's still a little deceiving because a lot of what's in the contracted salary benefits is just the cumulative effect of increasing enrollment. So those contractual increases are baked into that first category. So I do think that increasing enrollment actually contributes to a larger percentage than what's presented here. If you really look behind the numbers, but we thought this was the easiest way for people to understand the budget. Is there anything specific you wanted me to touch on? Okay.
Just a quick overview, just for folks who've haven't gone through the process, and it's been a while for me as well. So, thank you. And the budget book and all your other past presentations can be found online, correct? At Board of Education. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to anyone who has any questions, and if you have a question, just provide the page number that you are referring to. Anyone? Councilor Carey.
Okay. First of all, I agree with everything that everybody said. I think education is the most important investment we can make in our future, and having strong schools with good curriculums are essential. I mentioned to Dr. Carter and her team, I really enjoyed this budget book. I do have a preference for Excel, but I thought this was a very good book. It helped me a lot. It had good definitions, and it also had good budget notes. Oh, can you not hear me? I'm sorry. So really well done. Thank you. When I looked at this budget, I looked at this about 5 times. And what I did was I got rid of Things that I didn't even want to look at were teachers, programs, athletics, and activities. So I just shoved them all aside. So my questions are around some other things. So should I, like, I have a lot, so do you want to just ask one at a time, or?
Sure, and just remember to give the page number.
Okay, so on page number 11, I noticed that we're adding a new assistant principal at the high school, if I have that right. And I just wanted to understand, is that like a ratio, or what's the rationale for that?
Sure. So the rationale for the additional associate principal has a variety of buckets. I'll start with the most recent one I talked about, and that is we are actively asking our principals, particularly at the secondary level, to forecast what the staffing needs are going to be. And as I said, we're trying to incrementally add them and not hit you with 30 FTEs in one budget cycle, which would not go well. And then we also ask them to prioritize the order. So whether it's new subject area teachers, like a math teacher, we're looking at which subject needs to come before the other subject, because they're all going to need more teachers when we add 463 more kids. And as for the administration, the reason why you see that in this budget opposed to, say, a future budget is we know we're going to need this, and we are seeing, like every school district leader that I talk to, we are seeing behaviors that we haven't seen in years. We feel we need more supervision, more support to address those. And just on a practical level, I will share that you may know that we will have a new principal. And so that also makes me want to prioritize this position in advance of maybe some others that we know are coming, because whoever the new principal will be new. Even if they're experienced, they'll be new to us. And having a full complement of 4 associate principals will certainly help. The ratios right now are very high. When you're dividing the entire student body over just 3 associate principals. And the other reason that has moved up as a need sooner rather than the other ones that will be coming is that we've gone to a 2-building campus. So now we have supervision of the former Wapping School as well as the main campus. So we could have anywhere from 300 kids in that second building at any time. So we're looking to reduce the ratio of kids to administrators. And as we add more staff, those administrators have to, by law, supervise all of the staff that we have. So, they have big caseloads now on all of the teachers and other staff that they are required to evaluate, which is also a time-consuming process. And those of you who've had children go through the system, the time of the PPTs and the meetings and the parent meetings. Their day is dizzying. If you were to shadow one of them for a day, you'd be exhausted. And many of them, on a night like tonight, when there's cabaret at the high school, that's a 15-hour day for them. So that is why we would prioritize that position in this budget opposed to a future budget. It would actually be one of my top priorities to keep in terms of staffing for next year.
Okay, thank you very much. So on page 12, I see that we're adding a secretarial clerical position in the principal's office. Is that to support that principal?
No, that's actually to support in many things, but primarily the substitute coverage. Anyone who has this job will tell you it is very challenging in the morning to find subs for all of the teachers who may unexpectedly have gotten sick and not be able to report. We are required to supervise those students in those classrooms, so it can be a scramble. And they were finding that was getting increasingly difficult to manage. And as our population grows, there'll be more and more subs to secure and manage. So that was one of the main functions of adding some support in that office.
Okay. So next on page 14, one of the first things I saw is that POPs fees dropped from $77,000 to $70,000, and I just wondered why we expect that to happen.
Yes, thank you. It just looks like we have fewer students that we're anticipating for next year.
Okay.
Oh, and just to clarify, though, those are for regular education students that serve as typical
Yep.
peers. There are no fees for the students that are identified as special education, for which this is a mandated program.
Okay. So it looks like the peers, we have fewer peers then. Okay, thank you. And then also, I'm seeing that South Windsor Parking Pay to Play and TEM Pay to Play, all of their fees have dropped as well. I wondered if we knew why.
So I'm just looking at the drop. The parking dropped by just $766. The pay for play dropped by $663 out of $125,000, and the projected $32,000 is just $321 less. So those are estimates based on next year, and the very small drops are just what they're anticipating to be the number of kids associated with it.
I will apologize to everybody. This is after spending 45 years in business doing budgets. We worry about everything. One of our CFOs used to say, if you don't count the pennies, you'll never find the dollars. So, all right, so that's just, rounding down. Yeah. Okay. Why do we expect Title III and Title IV grants to drop?
Trace. Mrs. Peterson?
So those grants vary based on a variety of factors. So we actually don't know until the state tells us exactly what those amounts will be. So we have to kind of forecast based on what our allocations have been this year for upcoming years.
Okay, so this is, again, just like a rounding down type of thing, because we expect to have more multilingual students, I think, next year. This is one of the reasons that we're adding teachers.
It's just a complicated formula that
Okay.
comes from the state.
Okay. I don't want to hog everything if somebody else wants to ask a question. But, all right. Okay. Okay, that's not that one. Sorry. Okay. As I said, I skipped all the teacher things. So we go all the way to page 31. And this was just, this more coming from a different state. I noticed that we're buying books, and that's great, and I don't challenge that at all. Don't want anybody saying that I don't want us to buy books. But in the state that I came from, one of the things our PTAs did is our PTAs were huge fundraisers for our schools, and they prided themselves on not only buying books, but buying things that teachers needed and things. And so I wondered, I don't know enough about our schools. Do we have that here?
Yes, our PTOs are very generous, and these would be books for the actual library, which is part of a whole process that the librarians use to when books are deemed no longer useful life and they need to be replaced. But what you were describing still happens, which is PTOs might buy classroom libraries.
Okay.
So they may purchase a classroom library for second grade, let's say, and then all second grade classrooms in that building would get the same classroom library set, so to update those. So those tend to be more associated with PTO than our actual library
Okay.
space.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So on page 53, this is, again, just a question about pay for play. What is the pay for play cost?
Mr. Merkel.
Okay.
Mr. Merkel, we'll look that up for you.
Okay, so I can get the next one. So on page 67, water is going up 16%, and I know I pronounce that differently than everybody else. I am from Philadelphia. That seemed like a lot.
You said page 67?
On page 67, the water is going up 16.9%.
Oh.
And that just seemed like a lot for water to go up.
So there was a significant, I've got to switch to a different page, sorry. There is a significant increase, I believe, in water this year. Let me just see if I've got that amount. The water is going up an increase of 18%, so that is on target for what the increase was in water.
Huh. Okay.
We also have new buildings as well, so, maybe perhaps more water usage also in a larger building.
Okay. Okay. And I'm almost done, guys. I apologize.
If you want, I could probably respond to your pay-for-play request.
Oh, yes, that would be great.
So at the middle school, it is $100 per student with a $400 family cap. And at the high school, it's $125 per sport with a $500 cap, but then hockey and gymnastics are $400 each with an $800 cap.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, and we're really close to the end of my questions. So on page 75, and I understand these are low dollars, okay, but again, our copier expense, equipment expense, and professional services, I just wondered, the percentage increase seemed a little high, and I just wondered, where are we year to date on these costs? And we don't have to answer it right now. Just, is this logical that this is happening?
Just for the public, if in the budget notes on page 74, there's explanations for some of these things. So the communications and copiers and copy center increases is due to increased number of telephones and copiers at Pleasant Valley Elementary School and the high school annex taking that online, which is part of driving up those costs. The professional services increase is mainly due to a higher need for contracted support for networking upgrades at the high school. So those are services that we contract out for versus having our own employees, because it's specialized services that we would contract out for.
Okay, okay. Okay. All right. And this is my last group of questions. So on page 77, our life insurance went up 18.85%. And I'm pretty sure I did read these, and I didn't find that answer. It says an accounting adjustment based on full year 24 actual expenses, but for life insurance, do we self-insure or do we have a life insurer?
Yeah, we do not self-insure for that. We do have an agency, and what that was there's a portion of that the accidental death and dismemberment policies that we also have as associated with our life insurance were unfortunately not included. So it's looking like a larger jump going into next year because we did need to include that amount.
Okay, so they weren't in the
Included
last
in this
year.
year's budget, yes.
Oh, all right. Okay, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay, and then you and I briefly talked a little bit about medical and dental, and would be really interested to see what your agency sent you as far as your actuarial unrevealed claims number, if you have it, like that 25% number.
So when we do the budget status report, which will be coming out at our next board meeting,
Okay.
And I believe I actually sent some of those to you today as well,
Okay.
is we do talk about what our health claims experience is, as well as our percentage. Our insurance carriers say that industry standard is to keep 25% of our health claims experience in our reserve account. And on my quarterly reports, I talk about what that percentage is that we have in our accounts.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And
Do I have
Mrs.
one?
Carey, I'll just add that line that shows a 19% increase, and there is a note on this in the budget notes, but it's a good line to be able to explain. Last year, this account relied on $700,000 worth of reserves, so the jump is a reflection of true costs going up, but it's also a reflection of having to make up for having relied on reserves. So as you've heard me say in other meetings, the budget that you have in front of you tonight does not have reliance on reserves, But last year's budget, that was a 7.95% increase, even higher than this year's. Just to get it to 795, we utilized $1 million worth of reserves. 700,000 of that was in this account because we had, our account was very healthy. This year, we're running a little under than what we would like to be, or over, I guess I could say. But I think this line item is a good example of how the percentage can be deceiving if you were relying on reserves in the past. That's why when you hear me talk about the 729 and the 6.09, the 729 is the increase in the ask for appropriation because we're not pairing that with any reserves. Last year, our appropriation, we paired with reserves, which kept the 795 from being even higher than what it was. But when you use reserves, you create a cliff that as long as everybody understands that, it's not that you shouldn't ever use reserves, but people just have to know and plan that you're relying on them to under the unique circumstances we have of our growing enrollment.
Right, and you shouldn't use more reserves than is actuarially, fiscally responsible, right? Because then you're not going to be able to pay your claims. Okay. And then the only other thing that seemed to go up was tuition reimbursement, and I didn't know if that's because you have maybe newer teachers, and so they're more likely to be taking courses.
Yeah, that line is budgeted based on a survey that we send out to all staff in preparation for preparing this budget, and based on their responses and degrees that they're pursuing, we budget based on that amount.
Okay, great, thank you. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Councilor Carey. Anyone else? All right, who is first?
Doesn't matter. Mike can go first.
Okay, Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor Dunleavy. Great presentation. Thank you for your questions, Councilor Carey. Mine won't be as in-depth financially. But if I go back to, just because we're just on that, with the tuition reimbursement, am I assuming that once they get that reimbursement and they get that further education, that then we're going to be looking at salary increases?
Yes, that's correct, depending on the degree and where they are in the step process, but yes.
So, which gets me back to page 4. And again, this is probably a layman's question, but that's what I am. Contractual salary increases, $2,536,000. That's not payroll. That's just the increases, correct? Okay. And again, to restate from the summary page on the medical and dental, can we shop anything? Is there any way to improve that at all? Or are we in the best plan at the best price?
So I really feel like we probably are at this point. Every couple of years, in conjunction with the town, we, not every couple of years, but every several years, we go out to bid for our stop loss insurance, for our medical and dental insurance, and we look to see where we are. We did go out to bid a couple of years ago. The carrier that we had, we stayed with. They were also able to negotiate some lower rates for administrative costs. We do feel like that we're at a good price range for that. And again, this is the exact same line that Dr. Carter was just referencing. So $700,000 of that large increase you're seeing there is due to not having reserves last year. So really the difference, it would be the difference between that 700 and the number that's there.
Thank you for that lead into my next question. Where do the reserves come from?
So it's counterintuitive, but during the years of COVID, some of our accounts just really grew. As you probably know, there was a long period of time that people weren't going to the doctor. They weren't having appointments. They were pushing off surgeries. And so as a result, our healthcare reserve grew well beyond the 25% that's recommended. So we've been drawing that down over the last several budget cycles so that we're not overprescribed in our reserves and using them to help mitigate the impact of our enrollment growth. But as I said all these years through that ideally we want to wean ourselves off of that because it does create cliffs. So it is counterintuitive, but COVID actually generated a lot of money. You can imagine what we saved in substitutes since teachers weren't in the building for a few months, and now you're not paying a sub because they're home anyway, and transportation costs during that time. Transporting, 5,000 students, as you can imagine, adds up. And when you're not transporting those students, that the savings adds up as well.
I was hoping there's some formula to where we're always building up some reserves somewhere, no?
No, and I will say maybe a little bit to that point. We do so. Reserves really come in two forms for us, and that is if our medical, because we're self-funded, is overprescribed, then we can draw down on that as long as we're staying at the 25%. The other form of reserves that we have, which we can make a decision to grow as decision makers, is what they call a 2% account, and boards of ed are able to move up to 2% of any surplus funds at the close of their financial year to an account. We established this account many, many years ago, and that account is what we call the Special Education Reserve. And so when we can, we do put money in that reserve because our special education costs are so volatile and can just one student could move into town that suddenly costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that was designed to be able to sort of stabilize the budget if we were to have a spike that was unexpected, a student that moved in after the budget was created. And so that's what that special ed reserve is. We actually used the reserve in that account for our current fiscal year to be able to come in at the 795. We used $300,000 from that account. And $300,000 in special ed is actually, it's not that hard to have one or two students move in and suddenly you're hit with a cost like that.
Thank you very much. With regard to special ed, I think on page 49, how does the number of children outplacement 30 in 2023 and 2024 compare to other districts?
I don't have specific data, but I can tell you anecdotally in listening to my peers at meetings, I suspect our number is lower than most districts because they're doing a lot of sharing a lot of concerns about their outplacements, and it's not just the number that people are concerned about; it's the cost of the outplacements is growing and growing, and we don't have control over what a private special education facility might be charging. And sometimes we don't have control over whether a student is placed in that. Sometimes they're placed by us through the PPT process with agreement with the family and educators. And other times it may be placed by the state that this child needs to be in that program. So, and part of the reason why I think my guess is if we collected the data that our numbers would seem lower is because we have some really high quality in-district programs that otherwise would, if we didn't have them, we would have higher outplacement numbers. And it's one of those rare times, I think, when what's better is actually cheaper. That's not always true, but we often have some really high quality programming for our students that actually saves us money, but really it's actually also the best program for that child. One of the programs, there's 3 classrooms of students in Eli Terry that are one of those programs. There's another classroom at Pleasant Valley, and then there's also secondary examples as well. We've talked about, you may have heard me in other budget presentations refer to Effective School Solutions, which provides a lot of mental health support to our high school students. And sometimes with those supports, a student that might have had to have been partially or fully outplaced is able to remain in school.
Thank you for that answer. And finally, are there any creative programs we can do that can be kind of a pay-as-you-go, can be a revenue source for the school? It's adult education maybe, or something that can generate revenue as well as paying for itself?
I think because of our enrollment growth, it makes it a little bit harder for us because there is some regionalization of programs, and there may be some districts that because their enrollment's been going down, they have extra facility space. And what they might do is offer on a tuition basis to surrounding towns, say, for example, like our 18 to 22-year-old program that you may have heard me reference. We have our own full caseload here. But there are smaller districts that might only have 2 or 3 students, and so they combine forces with another district, and they might pay tuition in, which could become a revenue stream for that district. We're in a unique situation where there's not a lot of room, so it would be difficult for us to invite tuition-paying people in because of our growth.
Deputy Mayor Siracusa?
Thank you very much. I just want to start off by saying Mr. Kubaski's statement couldn't have described why I got involved any better. I have 2 daughters, one in 1st grade, one about to be in kindergarten. Been in town my whole life, and I realize not a whole lot of folks are living in town anymore that I graduated with. So I figured if I can get involved and maybe change that course and plant a seed to get it back to where I remember it being, that'd be a beautiful thing. So thank you for always being prepared. Everything was very articulate, the whole board. I'm sure you put in a lot of work. So thank you very much. Councilor Carey, DePauli next to me can see that I've checked off all my questions because Councilor Carey took care of that for me. The only question I have left, because I won't ask again, was more of just out of curiosity. On page 81, you don't need to flip to it or anything like that. It's talking about the leasing. I was just curious. Do we actually lease out the laptops and the iPads, and is that just the leasing of the servicing? And then to follow up with that, if we do lease those pieces of equipment, if something breaks, is that included in the leasing agreement to where they replace it, or are we also charged for that? Again, I had a full list of questions here that were a little more budget focused, but that kind of stuck out to me. I just really had no idea we'd be leasing all of our electronics.
Sure, those are leased to purchase. What we do is, so we don't turn them back at the end of the lease. We do keep them. We lease them for generally 4 years. And at the end of those 4 years, we use them for break-fix items, for other items, or in our rotations, we might move them down to, say, elementary levels, resource rooms, that kind of thing. As far as the break-fix goes, if something breaks, there is an insurance policy that we have. I believe the students or families pay for that policy, and it's sort of a self-insured policy. So we collect those funds, and then as needed, we do the repairs. But again, we also have the older items that we hold on to that we can do some of those repairs in-house.
Okay, so I'm assuming I signed that agreement for my daughter's iPad. So if you don't take that insurance policy, is it the actual parents that have to pay to replace that item then?
Yes, I believe that's true.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilor Balboni?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dr. Carter, I just had a couple of questions. When you were before us at the town council, I asked about the unfunded mandates. I was just wondering if we'd worked on getting that together and getting a full copy of it. I'm just curious what the total cost is of all of the mandates.
I think it would be difficult to parse out a total cost, but I did put together some more examples in response to your question, just to give you another feel of what some of them are. There is a 50-page document that we could share with you that just lists mandates, not all unfunded. But I wasn't sure that you really wanted that, but we're happy to provide it. But I thought I'd give you a couple more examples than the 2 I gave at the other meeting. And I just want to say that the examples that I'm going to provide are not ones that we're objecting to or saying that these are bad ideas. We're just saying they passed a law, and now we have to find the money to react to that law, whether or not the law we think is a good idea or a bad idea. So, for example, composting is something that is going to be required. And Chris has done, and our environmentalists are very happy about that, but although I'm not sure our cafeteria staff will be, but I will say that Ms. Jamerka talked to a neighboring district who started pricing that out, and for a small elementary of 344 students, that district estimated that it would cost about a little over $11,000 for that one school. So while it may be a noble gesture, it doesn't mean that it's free. And that's just an example of a law that creates an unfunded mandate for us. A significant one to keep an eye on, all of us, is the indoor air quality and HVAC inspections. That is a new mandate. And I think we would all agree, we all want quality, indoor air quality for our children, but it comes at a significant expense. And so again, Mr. Merca talked to some other districts that have been in the process and getting quotes, and based on that, we're estimating that just the inspections could cost $160,000. And the cost is high partially because when the state passes a sweeping law that all schools in the state have to respond to, well, people benefit in certain private industries, and so there's just a demand for services. There aren't even enough HVAC services out there for the whole state to have done this in the way that they've described it. So the demand is a problem, just the labor is a problem. It doesn't exempt newly built buildings, which is unfortunate because of 4 brand new elementary schools, and to have to spend money in the inspections for brand new facilities that just underwent that process is frustrating. And I know, we looked into, independent of this law years ago, what it would cost to, air condition the whole high school. It's significant. So many school superintendents are talking about this bill, and not because they don't believe in the spirit of it, but the untold millions and millions and millions of dollars this will affect school districts it's significant. This is an example of one, and this is a new one. I don't know that it's going to actually pass, but I thought it would be of interest to you. There's an act that's out there right now concerning our paraprofessionals. It's called an Act Concerning Paraeducators, and it's basically saying that by law, all paras would have a starting minimum salary of $45,000. And let me say to our paras out there, they are underpaid and overworked, and I will be the first to say that. They have really hard jobs. So my concern about this has nothing to do with not thinking that they are owed that, but my concern is when you create a sweeping statement that says now you have to have X employees making X that you didn't plan for. One, it undermines the collective bargaining. These are union employees, so I don't think this is going to go through because there's a lot of complications when you're talking about union employees. And that also raises the salary pretty close to what a first-year teacher would make. And with a teacher shortage going on, I'm not sure that's going to help the situation. They don't define what full-time is, and so in districts, what full-time is may look differently in different districts. And I would also add that a random number like 45,000 in Fairfield County is very different than 45,000 in Eastern Connecticut. And so to not have that, indexed to the living expenses also seems a little odd to me. So I bring that up as just an example of one that we have to watch and be thinking about. And this isn't a huge expense, but I think it gives you another flavor. The legislators will pass, we want paraprofessionals to get one more day of training on topics X, Y, and Z. And they pass the law, and all the school districts have to do it. But there's no money that comes with it, and when you add to the workday of your hourly employees, you are going to have to pay them. And so, for example, in South Windsor, just adding one extra professional development day that requires all of those employees to report an additional day would cost us about $25,000. Let's see. I think those are probably, does that give you a good flavor?
Actually, no. I'm just, like I said, I'm looking for the total impact because that seems to be the one thing that keeps getting hammered into me, is that the main driver of our increases has to do with unfunded mandates, and every time I'm hearing the numbers, they barely add up to 1% of the entire budget. So I was curious, I mean, if, say, the total impact were $5 million, my next question after that would be, what are the penalties for disobeying these mandates?
Let me clarify the first statement because I don't know if there just may be a miscommunication. We don't list unfunded in that page that we started with the drivers and those categories. We don't list unfunded mandates as one of the drivers we're identifying. I mean, you may hear that, in the paper, and people may say that. It affects our budget, but they're not the main driver of this budget. I mean, I guess if you want to consider that public education is mandated, I mean, most of what we do is required. It's not a lot of discretionary in what we do. But we don't identify that as a driver of our budget because you're correct. The numbers, I mean, as you saw in our drivers, we have other things that are really driving this budget, like increasing enrollment.
Definitely. And what sort of penalties are there for ignoring said mandates?
That's an interesting question because some of my colleagues will say, at times, we will all kind of talk and say, well, what would happen if we don't do it? And I can assure you, I shared it last time, but that question has been sort of been discussed and debated out in the superintendent world because you may have seen that I talked about the right to read legislation. And had there not been changes, South Windsor would have been looking at $1 million in requirements of purchasing materials that we didn't have a lot of choice in making. And I've never seen anything like that. That's quite unusual. Now, it's improved, I think you heard from my last presentation, but there were many superintendents saying, well, what if we keep our reading materials and what will happen? Are the literacy police coming to get us, right? And so some districts really did take a very strong stand. Many of them talked to attorneys about what kind of authority would happen if they didn't do it. So it's a question that I can't really answer, but I can tell you it's a question that many of my colleagues ask.
That's good to know. I'm well aware that our representatives in Hartford tend to make laws without having any clue what they're making the laws about and then pass them down and force us to obey them. The next question I had, I mean, just some simple ones actually. Carolyn obviously was pretty extensive going through everything. But back to page 67, I'm not sure about everybody else here. Maybe it's just my house and having a granddaughter and she leaves lights on all over the place, but our electricity is definitely going up. How are we saving $103,000 this year just on electricity?
So the simple answer is we're technically not saving that much money on electricity itself, the kilowatt hours, but what we are going to be getting in next year is a credit for the energy efficiency of the Pleasant Valley building. So we will be seeing a credit towards the account next year for that.
So that's just a one-year credit, I'm assuming?
It may span into 2 years.
Okay, excellent. Actually, I just have one more. On page 71, I know I'm looking at where things went down. I may not be looking the right way as these are negatives, but building and sites maintenance going down by almost $200,000, a 51% decrease. Why?
So what we've done in the budget for as long as I've been here, which is about 12 years, is we call this building and sites line. We ask when we build the budget for our principals, budget owners, to provide us with items that they would like to see or that they need to see in their budgets moving forward, whether it's moving one classroom to something else, or we need to change a room, certainly for growing enrollment. It used to be a resource room. We need to take out this wall, build it into a different classroom, and different items. So what happens over the years is we put all of those items into a category and we put them in here. And what we've done in this budget, unfortunately, is we feel like some of the items that were requested we need to defer. And again, as Dr. Carter said, they're probably items that will come up again next year because when you have facility items, they usually don't go away. We usually need to get them. But we saw through this budget that we could probably defer them for at least another year. So if you flip the page, I think, on the next page, what makes up that $184,267, those are the items that make up that building and sites number for next year, what we'll be paying for.
This is an account that I mentioned that we did a lot of cuts before this budget came to you, and we did cut a lot out of building and sites. And as Mr. Merker said, it's unfortunate because these aren't just nice to haves. We've got broken desks, we've got things that we need to move forward. But when we're in the environment that we're in, and we're trying to get it down to a 729, we did say, we'll say to our budget owners, can you go one more year? Can you go one more year? And sometimes the answer is no, and they end up on the list, and sometimes we would defer. If this were a different time and we didn't have increasing enrollment, it's likely we would have had more things in here because, as you can imagine with our district, there are a lot of building and sites expenses.
Okay. Couple things maybe not in the book. You mentioned that the average increase was 5.96. What about the average 2-year increase?
I don't have that data point. Do you mean doing a 2-year look back for the districts?
Last year and this year.
Last year and this year. I don't know. Amongst those 24 districts, I used just this year's proposed. Certainly, that's all public information that can be found. But I don't know last year what my area colleagues proposed, but I did calculate it for this year to give a context.
Okay. My concern was obviously the huge increase last year, plus another increase this year. And, I mean, maybe we're on par this year, but how much more did we spend between last year and this year? Another question. Before, I don't know how long it takes or whatnot to do your budget. It obviously looks like you do a great job putting it all together. At what point did you know there was going to be such an increase? Was it before or after you brought the fields to us?
Oh, our projections for where our budgets are going, we've talked about for years. So,
Okay.
I mean, our enrollment growth is something that is not a secret to the board, certainly. But I will say that what might be helpful, we've been growing for several years, but there's a lag between the growth and then when it hits the budget. Because for example, if you had class sizes, I'll just make it up, of 20, and you added more kids and you went to 21 on average across the district, you wouldn't feel that. But as 21 becomes 22 and 22 becomes 23, you start now tipping where you need another teacher. So there is a little bit of a lag time between the growth and the effect. So last year was the most acute effect of the 795. This 729, as you've heard me say, is not even a true reflection of the real cost. This is as low as I thought I could responsibly come to you with. And this was not a surprise, if that's the question.
No. You just led me to another question, though. Is there some sort of state mandate as to how many students a teacher can have? Or is that something we set?
It's something you set locally. So it's set in two different ways. There's Board of Education policy, and then there's also teacher's contract that also has language around class size.
I mean, don't get me wrong, you couldn't pay me any of these numbers to be a teacher, not in a million years. I totally respect what they do and whatnot, but not for me. I had a couple other questions that were emailed to me. I didn't have a chance to really go through it and clean them up. Someone was asking how much of the school budget is state mandated, in other words, to fit the state's requirements for educating the children. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I wouldn't have an exact percentage, but I mean, there's very little in here. There's some things that we choose to do locally. I'll give an example. We are not required to have K-5 STEM. That is something that we've made a decision to have. It's helping our kids become college and career ready. Our town would implode if we got rid of STEM at the elementary level, but technically that's an example of something that we're not mandated to offer. So we do, technically sports is not mandated, right? And you can imagine the reaction if we were to cut sports. So there are some things that we do that are not legally required, but there's not that many examples of that.
I think I'll take this other one to you in an email later when I put it together, exactly what is being asked here. I'm all good. Thank you.
And thank you for your comments about teachers. I'm sure they appreciate it. They have really hard jobs today, and it gets harder every year.
Mr. Zimmerman, you had a follow-up? No? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have just a quick follow-up. That mandate about the composting, did you say that is happening next year?
So it currently is required. However, I know that there are some discussions about maybe trying to see if we can reduce it. It's very specific about the tonnage that you have to have, and right now there's no formula to measure that tonnage. There's also a requirement that was in there that was taken out for this current year that says if you're within 20 miles of a certain type of facility that could handle that, and then they may be tweaking some of that language. But yes, that is effective for January 1st.
Okay.
Currently.
Do you know if we can sell that compost to like wholesalers?
So right now, the way that the law is written, it says that it must be provided and given to a certified composting facility, of which there's only a few in the state.
Okay. I guess my next question was, if not, can the taxpayers receive that compost? Sounds like no. Is our composting facility able to receive it?
We haven't really looked into that yet. I'll let the town manager answer that.
Forgot he was here.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would answer that with a no, because our composting facility is strictly leaf composting, and the composting they're talking about is food waste. It's a bit different.
Sounds like, again, an expensive thing put on us. Be nice if it could benefit the residents. We have the community garden. People have gardens in their backyards. So I understand your frustration there, coming down on us from the state. So, all right, thank you.
Councilor Pendleton?
Thank you. First, I'd like to say I've sat through many budgets, and I just want to say thank you to the Board of Ed members that are here and the chair for inviting us here and to be able to talk about this and to go through your budget process and the meetings that you've held and that you work through. And thank you, Dr. Carter, for your lovely presentation on your budget. And I'd like to thank the staff, the teachers, the staff, the employees. They're critical and crucial. Without them, we wouldn't be sitting here. So thank you to all of them and all the lives that they touch in our community, and your staff too. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little sad sitting here and listening to this. I am. I'm very sad. I'm sad for the fact that we knew about student enrollment how many years back? 5, 4, something like that. And we worked on the student enrollment year after year and the increasing, and we've been talking about student enrollment about all of those years. We all knew that this was going to happen. We all knew that the cost of everything was going to go up. I think what I'm sad about, I don't have any specific questions. Maybe I do. And so the increased enrollment is no surprise, and it shouldn't be to any of us. I guess my question is, hearing that this is just a, excuse me, I'm going to use a status quo, bare bones budget, what's the negative impact to our students and to our staff and our community as a whole?
That's a broad question. I guess what I would say, and I think what you heard in my commentary, is we have a terrific school system, and we have wonderful resources. No one's ever heard me say otherwise. I'm worried more about what's coming than where we are exactly today. I'm worried that if we were to, in any significant way, cut this budget, it's just like it takes a while for the enrollment to start hitting the budget. These reductions will just make a deeper and deeper hole. And I do believe eventually the ship will get righted because we'll keep pace with enrollment. And once we keep pace with enrollment, you will start to see lower numbers. I have jokingly said, unfortunately, that'll be the next superintendent who gets to be the hero, because the timing is such that it won't go down while I'm still here. But eventually, these are cyclical, right? These enrollment cycles. And so eventually you're going to plateau. And when you plateau, and as long as you've kept pace, you're going to start seeing budgets more typical to the ones that people saw from me for over a decade. Right now, we're just trying to keep up with the enrollment growth. And the more we resist it, the deeper the hole, the steeper the cliff, whatever the metaphor you want to use. So I am very worried that this budget is cut so close that any kind of significant reduction does start having to look at things like, I don't even want to say it out loud, but...
No, don't.
Right. I mean, because, and I think you guys have heard me say this, in my 14 years, I've not what many would call a tactic of saying we're going to have to cut sports and music, right? And then the whole place fills up with 1,000 parents. It's happened in other towns. It's happened in this town before I was here, and I have never done that. But I will say in earnest, if you start hearing me say things like that, it won't be a tactic. It'll be real, because I don't think it's right to emotionally manipulate our families to think they're going to lose world language, they're going to lose STEM, they're going to not have sports, unless it's true. And we're so tight, and enrollment is going to continue to grow, that if we don't keep pace, eventually there's no more reserve, there's nowhere where to go except to cut things like those programs. So that is my fear. But I will assure you that you will never hear me say that as a tactic. If I say it, it's because it's real.
Thank you for that. And I also have a question. 11.5 for staff, is that enough? Because you mentioned there may be 30 new teachers coming on board. Is that enough to get us, like you're saying, right now we're at the bare? Are we going to have a year of 15, another year of 15, or should we incorporate more and more each year? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
I don't think that's enough. I'm not you, but I'm saying I don't think that's enough.
I think it depends at the pace with which the council would want to get to that plateau and that equilibrium. So if there was an appetite for a larger than a 7.29% budget, which I've read the room, I don't know that there is, but let's just say if there was, I would try to expedite to get to the place where we would be fully staffed. So we know we're going to need those teachers, but we don't need those 30 teachers this year. And instead of waiting till the year where we need those 30 teachers and come to you with a budget that's, 15% increase because we're adding 30 FTEs, we're trying to be proactive and look ahead and say, okay, this year we're adding an associate principal at the high school. We know we need that. I think the other subject matters were English, math, and PE at the high school. So we're kind of getting those departments squared away. Next year, you'll hear me come to you with different subject matters, and we're going to slowly increase that staffing level to meet the demand at the high school, so that we're not coming to you with huge FTE increases. So to answer your question, we're trying to come in as low as we can without having such a slow pace that we are creating a worse clip for the taxpayer in South Windsor. That's what we're trying to do with this
I understand.
budget.
So that leads me to the question, was it a more FTEs presented to you and you reduced that in your $4 million?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Lots. Yeah.
Okay.
There were a lot of requests.
It's okay. It's okay. So I have an appetite. I don't want anybody in this room to die of a heart attack, but I have an appetite to increase this budget for the sheer fact that we don't need to be pinched so tight that we're going to have to kick the can down the road and make up for it the year down the road. It's not going to happen. We are in our second year of our reval of 5 years. Get revaled every 5 years. We're in our second year of that. We knew that all this was happening. What year are we in for our increased enrollment? When you first started mentioning it to us about 5 years ago, what year are we in right now, do you think? 3?
So I don't. I have to look at the chart. I believe 2016 is when we started to see the trend go from here to here. And right now we have projections out 10 years to 2033.
Yeah.
And we see that elementary is plateaued. We see between now and then that the middle school will continue to grow. And we see that the high school is projected to grow by another 463 students. But that's just 10 years out. We don't see a downturn yet in that projection, particularly at the high school level. So the growth is going to continue, but it's going to be a wave through the district. Our elementaries, believe it or not, we actually have I think 2 or 3 fewer FTEs in this budget for elementary because we've plateaued there. I want to say nothing else could happen, but right now, in terms of students and teacher ratio, we're pretty stable there. It's the middle school and the high school that as more kids keep passing through the system that you're going to see more. You're going to see the FTE requests at the secondary level. You're probably not going to see classroom teacher requests from us. Now, you may see special ed or you may see intervention, which are in here, because of the needs. But for just the regular classroom teacher, I'm not anticipating that you're going to see us coming for a lot of FTEs in that area. It's really going to be secondary.
And then that leads me to my next question. I remember last year when we were going through the budget process and you made a statement about every single day on the phone to find out if we needed to, we have a new student coming. Do we need to open up a new classroom? Do we need to hire a new teacher? Is it grade 3, grade 2, grade 4? Remember all that stress you had? Are you over that? Is that not happening this year in the elementary schools? You just said we plateaued in the elementary schools.
In the elementary schools, yes, we're stabilized.
Oh, that's so good to hear. However, that is happening at the middle school and the high school.
Yes, in different ways because the structure of secondary is different than K-5.
Right.
But let me be clear, we've stabilized for classroom teachers.
Okay.
There are unmet needs with intervention, our ML population. Our school psychologists, I believe there is one in here, are stretched to the max with PPTs, testing, and actually trying to meet the needs of students. So there are other positions that you may see in future budgets to meet needs, but it's the classroom teacher that I think we said since 2015 we've added 24. So 24 classroom teachers, I think we estimated that to be about a $2 million price tag. So think about that. That's just elementary that we've added 24 classrooms. In a lot of districts, that would be a whole school, and then some. So it's the pace with which our enrollment growth makes us such an outlier. I'm sure you remember the state map I showed you. Mm-hmm. That map, to me, is the most compelling story for South Windsor. That we're such an outlier. And I know I use that word a lot, but I can't think of any other way to describe how different we are. To add 24 FTEs just at your K-5 level is, I don't think there's anybody close to us that would be doing that right now. And, what is happening, I'm saying this anecdotally, while we're just keeping pace with enrollment, other districts who are declining are reinvesting. So instead of cutting FTEs because they're declining and cutting their budgets, they're keeping their budgets where they are so that they can lower class size or that they can shift funds to other needs in the district. So I shared why we're so consistent with the 24 other districts. Well, 20 of the 24 are declining, and the ones that are flat or barely increasing, their budgets look like ours. So I have to believe that they're investing rather than cutting. And of course, some of that is inflation, and there's a lot of things that are making most budgets higher than typical everywhere, not just South Windsor. So, as I said, a future council and board and a future superintendent will have the luxury of maybe in 2035 deciding if you want to slowly cut the budget back or if you want to reinvest some of the savings with the attrition of losing classrooms that you don't need to staff anymore. That's a long way off for most of us.
So if I could just, one more thing, just have a question, I guess, for both the town manager and maybe yourself. I know it was mentioned to us the other evening, I don't have my council notes with me, that 1 mil is 1 mil increase or decrease is $3.4 million, Mr. Marisco?
Correct. It's $3.4 million is the value of 1 mil.
Okay. So thank you. So even if you increase this budget a half a mil, let's just say, what would that, 1.75? $1.75 million increase this budget by $1.75 million, a half a mil to get us where we need to be. What would that do for you? For our community? 1.75.
You could do one of two things. You could increase the speed with which you're adding staff, so you'd be trying to maybe outpace enrollment and be ahead of it and get to that equilibrium sooner, right? The sooner you're staffed up, the sooner you can start seeing more of the maintenance budgets versus the growing budgets. Or, of course, you could take those funds and try to do some of the improvements that we cut out. Some of the staff positions that were cut, the building and sites. I mean, there's plenty of things in here that we wish we were doing. And like I said, I know there are board members and certainly parents and community members who would be advising me or hoping that I would have come in higher. I try to come in at a number that I think both the board and the council can defend.
Well, that's what I've heard. I've heard folks say that to me, that they wish you would come in higher because we're tired of the spikes and the lows and the ups and the downs. I thought we were going to start keeling it off and keeping us, between a 5 and a 7 or a 5 or 6 and an 8, and let's get us stable and plateauing with those budgets, this is something that we've known all along that's going to be happening. This is no news to us, but that would still allow you to maintain your staff. It would allow you to continue with the improvements that you were talking about. But even if you took that 1.75 and purchased staff, oh God help me, and hired some FTEs, and forgive me for that one, and purchased or did what you were talking, like split it and do something. But I'm cringing and I'm sad that we are in this tight of a crunch, that we shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. We all know that the reval affected every single person in our community. We know that. Our school system, our children, their education, the safety, the teachers, the staff, all of it is so critical and so important that they should be taken care of and taken care of well, and especially the students with the education. But thank you. I appreciate everything that you've done, and the Board of Ed members. Thank you.
Did you want to go, Mr. Zimmerman, or because I know Councilor King has been trying to bounce for the mic.
I'll defer to Councilor King.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The only question I had, and I'm glad I would not have probably even asked it if Councilor Balboni didn't bring it up, is my concern is, especially in today's society, gun laws, where they're at, the kids just roaming free, younger and younger ages. I would not even paid attention to page 72. What are the safety enhancements for the cameras? The number I see is, when I added it all up, was $40,000. We'll call it 41 for the safety enhancements for the camera, safety enhancements for the camera, safety enhancements for the camera. My concern is, and thankfully we haven't had this type of situation recently. Unfortunately, we just had a break-in at 7-Eleven, robbery, gunpoint. Down the way on Route 5, cars were stolen. We can't just live in a bubble and act as if nothing's going to happen to us here in South Windsor. My concern is, if something happens, I would rather, and I'm glad, thank you, Councilor Pendleton, in regards to what would that 1.75 do. The last thing that I want to hear, and I'm sure any of my fellow councilors as well as board members would want to hear, is, wait a minute, we had a situation at one of our schools, but because we couldn't afford $40,500 for the enhanced cameras. Whatever those are, I don't really care. At the end of the day, if that's something that a cop or something from an investigative standpoint would have said, well, unfortunately, you guys didn't approve the camera in the corner of the room, so we couldn't see that. And so I'm just wondering, and you might not have this answer, but obviously you put it on there for a reason. What are these safety enhancements?
So I'll answer that question and then maybe respond to sort of the bigger picture of what you're describing. So these are just we have cameras everywhere in our schools, and many times they need to be replaced because they've outlived their useful life. Sometimes we have discovered spots that don't have coverage, and so we're adding cameras, or we're often replacing cameras that have been through the cycle. I will say that safety is our number one priority as a school district over anything else. If money were no object, I would have an SRO at every building. They're great. We love our SROs. We now have safety officers at all of our elementary schools. That's an example of something that's not required. Would I ever recommend cutting that? No. But it is one of the things in the category that technically you don't have to have that. When I was talking with parents about strategic planning, and I asked, kind of opened it up to just a general conversation about, what was going well, it surprised me that in two of the schools that were the first to get the elementary safety officers, the degree to which that was their first and most full-throated response was they were so happy with knowing that someone is dedicated to that task and someone who's greeting families and knowing who the families are and knowing who the kids are. So that is a wonderful investment that we've made through our strategic plan, but it is also an investment that is not required. And so that's a decision that we're making as a community. If money were no object, I would have 2 monitors on every school bus every day. It's never going to happen financially, but that is what I would do if money were no object. I think many parents would tell you that they've had struggles when they've had their own 2 kids in the back seat. Now imagine 65 kids in the back seat, and your eyes have to be on the road. That's a unfunded mandate I'd be happy to see, because I just am surprised in this day and age that is not, it's not commonplace, by the way. So it's not that we're out of step not having that, but that is something I would do if money were no object related to safety. So there are many things we would do if money were no object. But to be clear, safety is our number one priority. And I will also share that school safety doesn't just come in the form of our SROs and our safety officers. There are many positions that you would not associate with safety that contribute greatly to the safety of our schools. A custodian who knows when someone seems out of place. Just the ratio of adults to kids, right? As the ratio of adults to kids, whether it's teachers, whether it's paraprofessionals, whatever the role, the more adults we have, the safer our schools, because that's more eyes and ears, not only responding to what we consider maybe external threats, but also helping us create safe hallways and safe places for kids. I mentioned the behaviors. We, like every other district, are facing issues with that. And the more adults in hallways, the more visible adults are. Not only can they prevent things, but they can respond to students who, if you're one of 500 kids who have the same, assistant principal, and that's a trusted adult that you could go to because you've heard about something that you think, could be dangerous for themselves or others. If you're like one of 500 kids and that's your AP, that's a ratio that also speaks to our safety. So I do hope that people realize that every employee, all 800 plus employees that we have, all have a role in school safety. Just it looks different depending on what their role is, but they all contribute to it.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Yep. Thank you, Mayor Delnicki. Just 3 things. 2 of them, Councilor Balboni asked the question. I just want to make sure, because I think some people, I'm not sure what the initial answer was, but either I'm wrong or I think some people are under a misunderstanding. Page 72, the projects listed there, building and site project list, that's what's in the budget. I think some people might think that's what's not in the budget because of the give and take. These are the ones that are actually in the budget. There is a list of things that aren't in the budget, but you don't see that here. All right, so that's number one. Number two, just like Dr. Carter today, I think she was pretty explicit telling us that for the next number of years, she didn't give a number of years, but for the next number of years, we're going to see budgets closer to last year and this year than the first 10 years that she was the superintendent. I think that's a quote from today. That same dialogue has happened over the last 3 or 4 years. So if you go back 2, 3, 4 years, that same conversation was happening at board meetings, when the board presented to the council, at quad meetings. So I understand the question of the timing of the field project, but just like she explained today, but even more explicitly at quad meetings and stuff, we've had the discussion. I don't want to say the sky is falling, but we've had the discussion that increases are coming, and you're not going to see 1%, 2%, and 3% for a while. So if it hasn't been clear before, from this day forward, it should be clear. No date certain, but next year you're not going to see 2%. I think that's pretty clear. Hopefully we're not going to see 8%, but I'm pretty certain it's not going to be 2%. And then my third comment was, Dr. Carter, maybe you can explain. I think I understand because the board chair wrote me a note while you were explaining it, but just for everybody else, I think most of us understand that in the elementary school and in the middle school, there's a teacher and a class. And I know the middle school is a little funky with teams and stuff. Elementary is really easy for me to understand. There's a teacher that has the kids all day, and there's some people that come in, and occasionally the kids go out to get specials and things. High school is much different. So when you describe to people that you might if money were no object, we might be able to hire somebody, let's say a year or two earlier than you absolutely need them. I'm guessing the answer is if we have 25 kids or 30 kids getting students getting a certain subject matter, and right now there's let's make the number better. Let's say 40, and we have 2 teachers. There'd be 20 approximately in each class. If we hired a third person, let's say we got 5 more kids that year, then it'd be 45, and there might be 3 classes of 15, 3 different. It's not like somebody's going to sit with nothing to do. It's not like they're going to get their own classroom like in the elementary school. But ultimately, we know we need another math teacher. We know we need another English teacher. Can you just walk us all through it, myself included?
I will go on. Yeah, and I'm going to invite Dr. Sanzo to be listening and fill in what I don't. So, but you are correct. Staffing the high school is different. It's easy to explain at the elementary. Every 23 kids, you have a teacher, and then you got to open up a new classroom if you get beyond a certain number. The high school, because of the variety of subject matter and the variety of levels, and I would say there's just a desire and a demand in our community for more and more rigorous courses, that there would never be a case where, as we start adding high school staff, that we didn't have something for someone to do. It would mean that and probably not right away because we're pretty stretched, but slowly we might have to give up electives. Slowly we're turning more and more kids away. There are more kids who want, economics, and we only have, one economics teacher, and so X get, turned away. If we had 2, we wouldn't be turning kids away, right? And then the other thing that's complicated at the high school is the certifications. The state doesn't make it easy to become a teacher, and they don't make it easy on filling shortage areas. There's a teacher shortage in general, which is why we work really, really hard on culture in South Windsor schools. We want people to stay, and we want people, sadly, to my colleagues, to leave other districts to come to us. So we want to be a destination district for teachers. And that's not just a nice to have. As this shortage becomes more and more real, communities like ours aren't feeling it yet, but we will. And for the reasons Mr. Balboni said, there are a lot of people who don't want to be a teacher right now. And I think we can all understand why that might be the case. And I say that as a person who loves education and has dedicated her career to that, but I'm a realist about the demands that are put on teachers right now. So when you get to the high school level and you need that French teacher, our person in charge of hiring for that, she's going to every career fair. She's calling everybody she knows just to try to fill that spot. And world language is definitely an area where we struggle. Math can be hard to fill. There are lots of certifications. One of our areas that we know a lot of kids really like is American Sign Language. We don't know if we're going to find someone certified to teach that. We're going to try, but we may not be able to find someone to do that. So the certifications, I know in science, one of the reasons why science maybe was ahead of some others is because the certifications within science are very particular, right? So some teachers are really strong at biology and others are at chemistry and others are at physics, and you're going to need someone who has the expertise separately. It's not just a general science teacher at the high school level. I have a feeling Dr. Stanzo has even better things to say about it than me. Any points you'd like to add?
I think Dr. Carter did an excellent job explaining it there. And the other piece that we look at is we're able to see what's the demand that we have from our students in their requests for next year. What courses do they need to continue to take to progress in their academic program? So as an example, we know that based on our projections and student interest, we're going to need, for example, 60 to 70 more seats available for students in mathematics, in English, in PE next year. Dr. Carter mentioned science as an example. We need to hire another chemistry or physics teacher next year as the enrollment growth progresses through the high school. And that need for additional seats for our students translates into the need for additional staffing. And we can project that out, through the next 10 years as 463 more students are going to be added to the high school.
I know Counselor Carey had her light on earlier. Did you want to follow up? Oh, there's...
Here you go. She did.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Mr. Zimmerman, you helped me with that because I was concerned because in here it said portable classroom lease year 2, and I was like, why did this come out of the budget? But so it didn't. The one thing I did want to mention is, again, I really believe strongly in education, but I understand this is a great budget, and as I said, I went through it. It's really well done. I do think that the SLAM enrollment forecast is low. And I have asked Michelle Leip for the assumptions that went into that forecast. And I'm going to try and play with those assumptions a little bit. But I do think it's low. But because of the situation we're in right now, we're just in a tight position because there are people who are empty nesters who, with this increase that we're going to put in front of them after last year's increase, will sell. And when they sell, they'll sell to children. And so we almost, in health insurance, we used to call this a death spiral. When you had people who were unhealthy, right, and too unhealthy, we didn't do the forecasting right with your reserves, you would have to raise your premiums too much, and what would happen is your healthiest people would leave. So in our town, our empty nesters are really essential to us because they don't fill the schools, right? But as they depart, I guarantee they're all going to be school children. And so we want to try and moderate that a little bit so that the schools don't overrun the forecast. So I do think we need to look at that. We're looking at the budget a lot, and I think that in 2028, we should be in good shape, okay? 2026 will be a little bit better than we are today. But 2028, we have some good news coming. And 2031, the first of our bonds will start to get paid off. And you're right, things will smooth down. But this year is a tight year. And it's a great budget. And I asked all my questions. You answered all my questions. I guess the only other question I would have is, if at the end of this year you don't use all of your budget, what happens to that?
So, in any given year, if we have unexpended funds at the end of the year, it goes in several priorities. If our health care was underfunded, we would want to bring that back up to the right level. We often have pension liabilities that we could improve if we put some unexpended funds in there. You noticed there, I forget the number, but it's a significant number that we cut for building and sites. So if there's that cracked sidewalk that didn't make this page, that's a safety issue, and we have the manpower to do it before the fiscal year ends, now we're fixing that sidewalk that got cut. So when we cut building and sites, we keep a very detailed list about what we might be able to achieve if there's unexpended funds. But I can assure you, it does not turn in, everybody gets a free glitter pen at the elementary schools. I mean, we really direct these funds to be fiscally responsible or to help offset known anticipated needs that are coming our way. Our building and sites has been cut so dramatically that is likely a place that you would see.
I know Councilor Pendleton had her light on earlier.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Councilor Carey, everything that you've just said this evening is not the first time that it's being said, because we do have a lot of empty nesters, and that's what we just survived for the last 2 years. A lot of the original empty nesters are retiring. They've sold their homes, and they moved out of town, and they moved elsewhere. So, yes, families have come in. A lot of that has happened. So that same conversation that you just stated tonight has been had over the last 5 years and what's been happening. So, Mr. Maniscalco, I'm sorry, this isn't for us, but Mr. Maniscalco, if you could, with that $500,000 being 1.75, if you could find out what that effective cost would be to the taxpayers of our community as an increase or an increase to the budget, if you can get that to Dr. Carter, and maybe she could get it to all the board members, and then you could get it to the town council members?
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Siracusa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dr. Carter, you earlier said we've been kicking the can down the road for too many years. And by we, do you mean like you've presented a budget that you need and it's getting slashed over the years, or have you not been presenting the amounts that you believe you needed? Can you just explain that further?
Sure. I would say that statement is more about my fears moving forward. Sure, if we had larger budgets in the past several years, we might be in a better place, right? We're kind of just keeping pace. So I'm more worried about a cut to this budget, so I guess to say the 729, that's not really what I would want to present, and that's not really going to help us get quicker to what we'll call that stabilization. The faster we get to that stabilization, the sooner you'll start seeing budgets like I've presented in the past. So I do think that knowing what would get passed for budgets along the past several years and understanding the constraints and the decision makers, as I said, we relied on reserves to try to just get to the 795, right? One positive news, I guess, is that for next year, we will be building off of a budget that did not rely on reserves. And for the past several years, I've been kind of weaning off the reliance on that, and we've used that to try to cobble it together. So one piece of good news is that next year's budget, if it's built off this 729, will be different than the past, say, I think 3 budgets that have had reliance, and we've reduced that reliance over the past 3 budgets. I think we have it in here. It was like $3 million down to 2, down to 1.5, and last year was 1, somewhere in that range. And so that gives me a little hope for next year. But if this very, very lean budget of 729 is cut, then next year I'm concerned. very concerned.
I guess my question was more, were you, because I just don't know, raising a young family and running a business, I wasn't paying attention as much as I am now, obviously. Were your budgets unanimously passed the way you wanted them in years past, or were you forced to cut in certain areas?
I would want to go back and get the history, but I guess anecdotally to answer your question, were they unanimously supported as you wanted? Sometimes a unanimous budget support was because I presented the budget that I thought would pass, not the budget that I would want.
Yeah, that's my question. Were you getting the money that you really wanted in years past? Because the same things seems to be with capital projects, and it just seems to be the same echo that I'm hearing is if we weren't kicking the can down the road, exactly as you said it, maybe things wouldn't be the way they are today. So it's our job to figure out how to, maybe it can't be solved all in 1 year, but how can we 4, 5, 6 years from now finally level things out?
Right. Right. And I would say that's what last year's budget of 795 and this year's budget of 729 are definitely trying to achieve that at a level that I thought could pass.
Okay.
If you said, Kate, can you make this happen faster to right the ship? I would say yes. We could go from a 729 to a higher percentage. We could build in more staff that we know we're going to need, and staff that we didn't move forward this year. So we could make it happen faster, but that also means a greater impact in the short term. So I'm trying to balance those things, and I just don't remember what our cuts have been. So I'd want to go back to really answer your question about when were we cut where I was, really concerned. I'll just be very candid. I'm very worried right now if this budget isn't supported in full. In 14 years, I don't think I've ever really lost sleep over this process, and I'm very worried.
Yeah, I don't think I've been questioning it. Just like Carolyn said, you answered all the questions that I had. A lot of those were the same that Carolyn had. Again, just trying to think of everybody, right? Went to thousands of homes during the campaign, and a lot of people are hurting, myself included. We saw that increase, and I just want to hear, the full story and the history again, because we're supposed to be here to help solve the problem. So I don't want you to think that anything in here is something that I'm opposed to, because I do believe that it is very important. But we also have to try to figure out the real problem that everybody kind of shares the same feeling that you have. So thank you.
Mr. Maki?
I just wanted to say one thing, and the board members have heard me say this before, but as the council goes through this, I think it's really important that, yes, these are numbers that are real, but there's messages behind this. And what I mean by that, as a teacher myself, when we start talking about cutting programs or not supporting tuition stuff, I'm not saying that you said that, but how important it is to do those programs. South Windsor is a destination district where teachers want to work, and we have to continue as a board. Councilor Siracusa and I, we're the young ones here that have kids that I want our kids to thrive like we did, and I think we have to continue to support that. So, yeah, sorry. Oh, Genevieve too. I'm sorry. Yeah. Her kids are old. Her kids are older. Yeah, we got kindergartners coming. Oh yeah. So sorry about that. You're important and you matter. So what I want to say is, just as you go through this, just remember that how important it is for the programs that we're offering. I'll be honest. We talked about how I wish there was more for us. I almost feel like this is the same district that I had, which I know Mr. Zimmerman said he did pretty well at. Yes, I did, but I want to continue to make it better for our kids. And I know the money is the biggest issue that everybody's talking about, but remember, these are people's lives. As a teacher, if we don't continue to support them and give them the resources to be better teachers, or give them the resources to be able to run programs, or to have their back, or to give professional development to the admin to continue to support teachers, then our school district goes down. So as we go through this, I know we're nervous things could get cut. There's a bigger picture of people's lives and the effect that it's going to do by simply cutting some things just to save a little bit of cash. There's much more to this than a little bit of cash. And I know that we're all worried about the money, but we got people's lives, kids on the line, and I just think it's really important that as we think about that, remember, we have to continue to fund these programs so our schools can continue to be great. Otherwise, we'll just be here, and I don't think any of us want us to just be okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Gee, I can kind of get a question in. It's basically almost one of what Councilor Carey brought up. Back with the, on page 9, the enrollment projections each year has like 375, this is at the high school, 375, 378. These numbers, I know it's 40-something years ago, these were basically the same numbers in 76, 77, 78, 79, through the 80s. The same numbers. And we only had 2 associate principals. So I'm just guessing that, because you're saying there's more teachers, so that's why you need more of the associate principals.
And I would say we're closer in age than I am with these young folks here. It's a very different day at our high school, at all of our schools. The demands, the requirements, sort of under the category of unfunded mandates. There's also so many requirements that require a certain staffing level of administrators to keep your building safe, to meet all of the demands that are required. Special education has an incredible demand on our administrative staff, and not just special education staff, but regular education administrators who need to be at the PPT, the paperwork, there's so much compliance work that comes with the job on top of all of the supervision work that these folks do. I would also guess that our night events require much more supervision than maybe when we were in school, and there's more of them. So one of the things that, this is just one benefit of having more administrators at the high school, is that there's more administrators to divide up the nights so that there's fewer 15-hour days because there's one more person contributing to the supervision. There's something in the high school every night, and we have administrators at all events, and sometimes we need multiple. And that there's a cost to that. And there, not just teacher, but administrator burnout is a real thing right now. We're seeing, not only in South Windsor, but all over the nation, school leaders stepping down from their positions in a way I never saw in my career. People taking significant pay cuts just to try to step away from the demands of being a school administrator. And, you know, one of the things that I talked about culture, that to be a good steward of our staff is making sure that we don't burn them out so much that suddenly we don't have the staffing that we need at the high school, and then the safety issues compound because we don't have the supervision staff. So, I mean, like I said, spending a day following a high school AP from 6:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night would be eye-opening, even for me, who lives it every day. Just trying to just physically stay in pace with them for that whole length of time, I think people would be astounded at the variety of responsibilities they have and the diversity of responsibilities that they have in any one given day. They are going 100 miles an hour in ways that I think is different than when we were younger.
Yeah, because I remember back in those days, too, we only had one superintendent and an assistant superintendent and the business manager. Different title now, but. And having 2 superintendents and not raising it anymore.
Right. The same answer. Any superintendent who was a superintendent 15, 20 years ago would tell you they would never, ever do the job now. They wouldn't do it. They've all said it to me. If this was what it was, I wouldn't have ever done it in the first place. It's so different now. The requirements that we have, the litigiousness of our society, the lawsuit mitigation, the accountability. The accountability is probably one of one of the greatest drivers in the need for staff, because there's so much accountability, and I'm not complaining about it, but there's a lot of accountability to the state, and the requirements for the reporting are, I think people would be very surprised if they knew how many reports we're required to generate in any given school year. So it's definitely a different job. I know veteran superintendents have said to me, no, I would not have done it. It was just a different job. And even in I'm one of the longest running superintendents in Connecticut. I'm one of the most veteran. And the job just in 14 years has changed pretty dramatically.
Yeah, thank you, because just with the assistant principal thing, it just threw me off that it's like it survived way back when, same number of students. So I thank you for that. Ms. Manili?
Yes, thank you. We've been talking about, this goes along with Mr. Mackey, social emotional learning is very big in the schools, and that's something that hasn't been mentioned at all this time. So both between students and teachers and administrators, that's a big thing right now. And the school psychologists, the guidance counselors, the teachers, administrators, superintendents, there really needs to be an awareness. And you can't keep blaming COVID for a whole bunch of stuff, but COVID really did a number on school systems. They did a number on the workforce. Many people get to work at home from home right now. Teachers can't work from home. We tried that. It didn't work. And I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for 34 years. And not in this district, but because I can't be here. But it's just, it's hard. And teachers are burning out. People are leaving in the middle of the year, which never, ever happened. And why? Because we're tired. And the kids they need social emotional learning and some guidance with that, because they didn't know how to interact with other people. And you would think, oh, your parents should be doing that. Well, a lot of these parents now, because of COVID, both parents are working. So, their children are, a lot, they don't really have the same support we had when, I'm 60. So, it was 45 years ago before I was in high school. So it's just a whole different world, My mother took care of us, and, we did what we were told. It's not the same right now. You put 5,000 kids in a district, you're going to have some conflicts, and there needs to be some way to break those conflicts up. There are websites of fighting, and the first thing, social media is, it's a whole different. We didn't have this when we were younger, and this is a detriment to a lot of our society, and that's an unfunded mandate. That nobody says we can't have phones in school, because parents need to be able to get hold of their children, and so we need to be aware of this. So when we ask for a school psychologist. And I say when we bring it to the town council, we're not just asking because it's a want. It really is a need. And all you have to do is spend a day in one of the schools, even elementary schools, middle school, high school. Ride the bus with your child. See how that goes, or stand at the bus stop with your child and see how that goes. There's things that need to be, taken care of. And the teachers need just as much support. And I think, I talk to a lot of teachers because they're my friends, and I think that they really feel supported here in this town. Maybe there's some people maybe a little disgruntled, but everybody gets mad at your own boss kind of thing. But I think we do a good job here in South Windsor making sure that our teachers are taken care of. And again, if you don't believe that, go to a different district and see what it's like somewhere else. Just for an hour. Don't even spend 15 hours following a principal or assistant principal. And there's many people who could be a principal, assistant principal, or a superintendent, but who wants that? We can't work from home. We can't just be on our computer behind a screen. We're in front of the children, and every day somebody has another issue, and I think, so I would hope that the town council looks to this as more than just money or what you're getting for every single dollar that's spent. And like Dr. Carter has said, she's asked for whatever she thinks we can support, both town councilors and the Board of Ed. And that's why we as the Board of Ed supported her budget 100%. We would love to add more. There's a couple board members who are mad because we didn't get to put anything fun into this budget because it just wasn't the time. Eventually, when things are more deferred and there's more money and there's more availability of teachers, we'll put back some fun things into the budget. But right now, this is what we need to make this district stay where it's supposed to be. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from anyone? All right. Appears there's no more questions. I'd like to wrap up tonight and say thank you to Dr. Carter, Ms. Peterson, Mr. Sanzo, Ms. Chamerka, Board of Education members, our town manager who had to leave, and our clerk of the council and my fellow counselors. So I just want to let everyone know that we got our public hearing on the Board of Ed budget April 1st. Not an appropriate day, but at 8 p.m. in Town Council chambers. And hopefully the public will come out, and if they have more questions, and if they didn't hear certain particular questions tonight, hopefully they'll come forward, and if they need more clarification, answers will be provided. So we have item 5, executive session. Seeing none. Item 6, do we hear an adjournment?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. So adjourned. Thank you.